your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 238th meeting since we started in February of 2009. I guess everybody's eating. Can you hear me all right? Oh. You can't hear me? Can you hear me? You can't hear me.
I can't hear you now.
You can't hear me? Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me?
I got some background noise behind you. Tom, I got some background.
Testing 1, 2. I guess we're all right. All right. Welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 238th meeting since we started in February of 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require our speakers take a position on an issue, express a point of view. Can you hear me all right? Well, they're too busy talking. You got to understand this is how that works. Anyway, we try to talk over the noise. Anyway, we put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require our speakers take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we only listen to one fool at a time. Following that, we have questions and answers, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium here to respond to what the speaker said for or against. The speaker gets the last word, gets a comment and close the meeting. That's how it works. Anyway, before we start, are there any announcements? Now's the time for it. Come on up here and make your announcement. There's one here, one here. So.
Well, who do you want?
Well, I told her first. Yeah, well, go ahead. Ladies first,
Ladies first. Okay, this is for the Against Charter Schools, and they're having a meeting on the 26th. The only problem is they put the address, but they didn't put the name. I'm assuming it's a school. So I just wanted to pass this around, and if people want to write down the information to show up to the meeting, that'd be great. Thank you.
Can I have the remainder for her time?
Yes.
No. Did I hear some negativity here? Hi guys. I do have a couple brochures on this Earth, Wind and Fire Energy Summit that's being presented by the Sierra Club. It will be at the Addison Conference Center, and it's October 4th and 5th. It's a 2-day event. Right now you can get a ticket for $55. You wait till after September 2nd, it'll be $70. There are limited seats, and I will put this, where should I put it, Tom, where people can look at it?
I don't know.
Well, get these people out of my way. But anyway, take a look at it. We'll pass one around where you can see it. Then there'll be some others. And if you'd like to copy things down, that'd be fine. I only have a few of them. You want to pass this out? For those.
Stand up like a human building.
I do that all day long. Car wash.
Any other announcements?
About Rick.
Rick Perry, oh yeah.
No, we can't.
We can't announce that, but we could. We got indicted today, or yesterday. So most people know that. If they have TV, radio, something, they told us, or they've talked about it, they know. Next week, we have George Nolan, that's the guy that just stood up here. He's our speaker. He's going to talk about what have we done to our country, what our enemies couldn't do. He's the president of Dallas Alliance for Retired Americans, former Braniff AP mechanic and supervisor, and activist with Occupy Dallas, Occupy Congress, and others. He's going to discuss the influence of money in politics thanks to the Citizens United decision, the rise of the Tea Party, who backs them, the misguided evangelical movement, and Ralph Reed, militias, sovereign citizens, the resurgence of KKK, and other hate groups. George will point out how lying is a big weapon used by the far right and its talking heads, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, and Alex Smith. He'll also cover the climate deniers, the Heartland Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and who funds them. George will somehow show convincingly that we have done to our country what our enemies couldn't do. So that's next week, so don't forget George next week. 2 weeks from now, we have Gene Lance. He's going to talk about Labor Day, past and present and future. And in September, it's on your itinerary there. You can look it up. Why organized religion is undeserving of respect it holds in society, Dr. Stephen Butler. September 13th, we have Norma Water, retired legal federal investigator, and Will Social Security be around in 50 years, so that'll be interesting. So, yes, come on, Susie, make your announcement.
I have an announcement. Last Thursday was a very special day for my friend Frances. It was her birthday. And so now, even though she's not finished eating yet, we are going to make her blow out a candle.
How about happy birthday? Or do we wait for the cake?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Francis. Happy birthday to you.
This is the easy way to do it, right, Francis?
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
You blow it out. You make a wish, blow it out.
She's still wishing.
Now this is,
All right. Your wish came true, Francis. I'll shut up. All right. Your wish came true, Francis. I'll shut up.
He's gonna shut up, he said. Okay, no more speakers? All right, our speaker tonight is Calvin Bluiett. He's sitting right here. He's an adjunct government professor at Clear Valley College. He'll discuss how the means net worth of households in the upper 77% of wealth distribution rose to an estimated 28%, while the means net worth of households in the lower 93% dropped by 4%. Calvin will show how this trend is now threatening the foundations in our society. He will show how consumer spending makes up 70% of American activities, and thus with income inequality, the lower 93% has to borrow, which results in reduced spending, which has led to excessive unemployment and a vast reduction in the middle class. He will outline 10 steps we need to take to reverse this trend. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Calvin Bluiett.
Thank you. A number of people have kind of touched on this subject about the death of the middle class, the decline of the middle class in the United States, and there are some particular reasons for them, and I'm going to try to deal with some of them. The Pew Research Center report found that from 2009 to 2011, the mean net worth of households in up to 7% of wealth distribution rose to an estimated 28%, while the mean net worth of households in the lower 93% dropped by 4%. And that's the real concern I have. My position is we need to take action to stop the policies that create this wide inequity between working people and the elite. There are about 5 or 6 things that has happened, and most of you can relate to them. The public school system is under attack, and we have poor public policy. Education is one of the reasons most people argue that the income inequities is growing. You can look at the DISD system, and most urban systems have problems with public education. We have poor public policy. Policy, like Tone says, we have the best Congress that money can buy. And that's why we have poor public policy. And many times, Congress, just an example, the immigration bill, a majority of Americans think we should have immigration reform that's fair both to us citizens of the United States and for those people who are here illegally. But Congress, the House won't act. And we have other situations similar to that. And so that's one of the things, that's poor public policy. And greed, maybe the greatest thing. It seemed that the top 1% or 4% want everything for themselves. And it seems in America, rather than United States influencing this issue in Mexico and Central and South America, we're becoming more like them than they are like we would like to be, where we have a strong, vibrant middle class. And this is one of the other things we have. In most public policy designed to help the rich get richer at the expense of poor people, like major multinational corporations. They moved the office. Walgreens was considered doing it, but we somewhat stopped it for this point. They want to move the office to a foreign country so they'll pay fewer or less taxes. And if you look at most of the wars that we have been involved in, they were not necessarily in our national interest, but in the interest of the multinational corporation, to give them opportunities to operate in foreign countries. And then we do that, finance a huge defense budget, and they don't want to pay taxes, and they benefit. And so that's greed does that. There have been some structural changes in the workforce. Many jobs that existed 15, 20 years ago are gone and won't be coming back. Right now, if you don't have a skill or trade or profession that there's a need for, you're in a very difficult situation right now. And the industrial base in the United States used to be kind of the core of the middle class. With labor unions strong, they earn good money. Now with labor unions about washed out, incomes are going down because we don't have anyone pushing for it that have strength. So those industrial jobs are leaving, and many jobs, anything can be done over the computer, is going global. If you have an internet problem, you're going to get a voice you can't hardly understand, and then you have a lot of people that are tricking people that they're going to do something for your computer and they don't do it, and you don't pay the fee, and they never stop bothering you. So the structural changes is something we have in this country that we need to think about. Globalization is the whole driving force for that, but in many respects, the United States has always been a trading nation. But we started off with mercantilism, where the policy was you sell more than you buy, and that's a net profit for the country. But if you look at the trade deficit, or the balance of payment deficit, it's not positive for the United States. So we're losing. With NAFTA, we have trade deficit with both Mexico and Canada. And we probably will have trade deficit with the new trade pact signed with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama. So we don't need free trade, I don't think. We need fair trade. Fair trade so all the nations have an opportunity through efficiency to do well. The military-industrial complex. President Eisenhower in his farewell address warned the United States about the military-industrial complex. Now, it's a huge operation, a great deal of money, and they want a war going on all the time so that they can make money, not pay taxes, and we'll saddle our children with those taxes, and plus the middle class will have to pay. So the military-industrial complex, this was what was true when President Eisenhower ended his term in 1960. But since that time, we have other complexes that are growing. The prison system, it's a growing entity economically. It costs more to send someone to prison than it does to send them to college. But we don't want to have money to send people to school, but we are willing to build the prisons and send people down for having a little bit too much marijuana, insignificant things that really, it may hurt the person, but it may not hurt the whole economy. The prison system, and the industrial, the educational system. They have found out that there's money in public schools, particularly the ISD, and that's why they want home rules. They want to control that money at the expense of the teachers and the students. And so those are some of the things, the other complexes we have. The healthcare is a very potent complex. We have to have it. And but we're trying to get a handle on reducing the cost and creating a system so everyone can have health care, but it's not going to be free. Unfair tax system. The tax system is written for the rich by the rich at our expense. And many of us agree with that and vote for candidates whose policy will hurt us. Deregulation. If you look at the real causes of the Great Depression of 1929, we had no regulations. And private corporations could do anything they wanted to, and at our expense. And it caused the stock market to collapse, and it created a lot of hurt for even a large number of people who had money. And we had a similar situation in 2007 and 2008, where some people with money got hurt a great deal, and a large number of people in the mortgage dilemma got hurt. So deregulation. Money in politics, that's a growing thing now. We have wealthy people with the Citizen United decision and another decision they made which says, a corporation is a person, money is free speech, and we can't limit that. And so they can pour dollars they're pouring the dollars in for good government. They're pouring money in it for good government for themselves. And that's what we need to, as citizens, need to understand. Radical ideology. The last time I made a president, I pointed out, you have extremes in both parties, to the left and to the right. And those are the people that are creating ours, and the huge number of people in the middle, we're not doing anything, we're not saying anything. We're not as vocal, and so that's why we have those kinds of problems. So these are some of the trends in our economy that is causing a greater inequity. There are three things we need to look at. Our economy, consumer spending makes up 70% of American economic activities. Thus, with income inequality, the lower 93% has to borrow and reduce spending, which leads to excessive unemployment. We saw that in 2008, in 2009. The job situation seems to be getting better, but it's not the kind of jobs that we had years ago. They're not labor intensive. They're digital and technical intensive. Many of the jobs that are returning to the United States, like these huge warehouses they're building all around Dallas. Dallas is located geographically for transportation and distribution. But those warehouses don't hire a large number of people. They have robots to do the work that I used to do when I was in college in warehouses, unloading boxcars, loading boxcars, loading trucks and unloading trucks. Used to have, that would be labor intensive. That's not labor intensive anymore. That's just one example of that. This has led to the reduction in the middle class. Hence, we are now using the term working class. We're not using middle class no more, working class. So everybody who make the minimum wage, or if you work, you're working class. And the middle class is struggling. And what the middle class has tried to do to try to maintain the status quo, they'll max out their credit cards and they'll borrow all they can borrow. And, you know, that's not good for the nation either. So that's what this is forcing people to do. When the top 10% garners more than 23% of the total income, where in 1929 and 2007, which was preceded by increased borrowing, which led to depression in 1929. Just an example, the mortgage thing was in 2008. They had what they call collateral debt obligations. And all institutions purchased huge amounts of that. And they sold homes to people who didn't have the ability to pay. They defaulted on the loans, and these collateral debt obligations was distributed worldwide. It affected the whole world, really, in the Western world. And they were not worth anything. And this is credit, you know, credit on top of credit. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is the one that securitized mortgages. And that's had a major impact. And the other thing that caused that is they deregulated financial institutions. So a bank could be a bank, an insurance company, and a brokerage company. If anyone had told me in 2008 that Merrill Lynch was going bankrupt, I wouldn't have believed it at all. But they got loaded down with these collateral debt obligations. And the collateral, most of us know what collateral is. We had to have collateral to borrow money. Something of value that the bank could take if you didn't pay your notes. But they weren't worth anything. And the rating agencies rated them highly. So the consumer didn't have no one looking after what's best, what's really the national interest, but was in the financial interest of, the real estate agencies. They sold it, they got their commission, and they were okay. But when it got down to the people paying it back, they couldn't, and so we had a huge number of people lost their homes, and that also pulled people from the middle class to the lower class because they didn't have a home, and all the $700 billion that was voted to try to help people with mortgages and banks were too large to fail. It didn't work because if they refinance it with a reduced interest rate and you couldn't pay it, then you couldn't really refinance it. You could only refinance it if you had the money, enough money coming in to pay it. And so a large number of people who had purchased more home than perhaps they should have lost. And that really hurt them. Another way, the value of all homes went down. And many people's investment is in their home. They buy a huge house with the expectation of selling with a large capital gain. But during this period, if you sold your home, you lost money. People were paying mortgage on much more mortgage than the value of the house. So these are some of the problems that were created because of deregulation. And we need to reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act, which let a bank be a bank. A good example is Bank of America. I've been dealing with them since they were nation banks, and when all the banks in Texas were broke in the 80s. They had a president that was an outstanding bank president. But when he brought in to be an insurance company, be a brokerage company, he didn't have the skills, or he or she didn't have, it was a he. He didn't have the skills for insurance. You've got to be as smart in insurance to be insurance is complex. And we don't have, some executives don't have the ability to delegate, to come up with some kind of subsidiary and have a person that's as strong in insurance as he was in banking, and the same thing in brokerage. So he tried to manage all of it. He acquired a countrywide bank, and then through the federal government, he can end up with Merrill Lynch. And they all were suffering from the same problem, the collateral debt obligation. And then AIG, the largest insurance company in the world, we're going to insure those. Credit default swaps. And when all these foreclosures, they couldn't do it and they were going under. The government bailed them out, bought their stocks, and sold their stock with a huge capital gains for the taxpayers. And they wanted to sue the government for participating in private enterprise. So this is the greed that we have. So if we don't deal with a better, I'm not saying allocation or distribution, but opportunities for people to earn a living wage, then our economy will get smaller. And that's what we got to try to do, and that's what we're concerned about. If people don't have money, they can't spend money. And if we have money, when things were good, the economists were saying the average person is 3 paychecks from poverty. We live that tight, and that wasn't good for us. The second thing is our ideal of equal opportunity. Widen inequality, challenge the nation's core ideas of equal opportunity. And what this is saying is, when I'm threatened, then I'm not as, I'm uptight, and I'm not looking for those persons who are doing worse. I'm not looking out for those persons who are doing worse. And this is what a large number of middle class, we're threatened. And so we don't even do what we are to do to help those persons who are doing worse than we are. And we find all kinds of excuses. They're lazy, they don't want to work, all those kinds of things, which in some cases are true, but for the vast majority of people, they would rather work, but they like to be paid a decent wage, a salary. So when that happens, that further broadens this inequality, because everybody is, we stop spending, we try to pay off our bills, those of us who can, and that don't help the economy. And that causes everybody to tighten up, and then we begin to make it more difficult, and then Congress won't act in a way to create more jobs. We find it difficult for open mobility. The young people who graduate from college right now, I think they're doing pretty good this year, but they have had a hard, difficult time. And they graduate with huge loans, college loans. And if they don't have a job, they can't pay it back. If you don't pay that loan back, your credit will never be good. You've got to pay that student loan back. If you don't, it's going to affect you a great deal. So this, in addition, when the middle class is in decline and the median household incomes are dropping, there are fewer opportunities for upward mobility. Thus, a stressed middle class is less willing to share the ladder of opportunity with those below it. For this reason, the issue of widening inequality cannot be separated from poverty and diminishing opportunities for those near the bottom. The third thing is our democracy. We say we have a representative democracy. And Abraham Lincoln defined it as government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And when I teach a class, I ask students a question. Some of them are more astute than some of us adults. And I ask them, is that true? I say, that's theory, but in practice, is that true? And the answer is always no. And they say democracy is government for the rich, by the rich, and of the rich. And so there's some truth to that. When you look at the tax system and what we do to help the rich, and we do very little to help the poor. The nexus between widening inequality, which is undermining our representative democracy, has long been understood. We may have a democracy, or we may have great wealth concentrated in the hands of the elite, but we cannot have both, since political power follows the upward trends of wealth. money flowing into the political campaigns, lobbying, think tanks, expert witness, and media campaigns by disproportionate influence. And that's why the Citizen United decision is so destructive to representative democracy, is that I tell my students that when you do your income tax, check yes on that dollar. That's more a referendum to see whether people would want a national public finance election. But I can't convince them that they're going to lose, that they're not going to lose anything. They think they're going to lose $1. And so they don't check it. So, even we had honest politicians, they said, well, if nobody wants it, let's keep on doing the way we're doing. And Citizen United says, if you have money, you can really buy the government. And the policy is made by the wealthy. They have organizations, they do it, and they keep their hands pretty clean. We don't even have transparency in the citizen decision. You can give them money in certain organizations, and they're really not 501c3 organizations, but they handle as if they are. And can't even reveal where the money came from. So that's lessening the impact of our representative democracy. And then we have too many people who don't understand the issues. Too many people that don't like to read, don't like to think, they like to go with what sounds good. And so that further weakens our concept of democracy. My position is, if we exercise our citizenship responsibility, this will not be. But if we don't exercise our citizenship responsibility, then what happens is not going to be good for us. It's going to be good for the people who are putting the money up. And they are not putting that money up there for good government. They're putting that money up there to get what they want. They get what they want. The prison system. In Texas, we privatized some parts of the system, the prison system. And so it's the poor working people. Even in the school system, they have a track that leads to prison. If you put in alternative classes, you're not going to graduate with anything you can use. And you go into prison. And when people get out of prison, they're not rehabilitated. They're sent back out in worse condition than when they were sent in the first time. And they go back. Because in prison, they could eat and sleep. But in real life, nobody will hire them. And so they can't eat and sleep, so they do something to go back. And that's a terrible system. We need to try to educate everybody. Because I think if you don't have an educated society in a democracy, representative democracy, it won't work. It won't work. People need to know what the facts are and vote based on those facts. And the other thing that we really have a class system in the United States. A class system means that, it's rich people. And it grew out of England when you had, these levels, and you really couldn't get out of it. You were born in the lower track, you couldn't get out of it. And after World War II, in America, people began to get out because of the industrial job, unionization, and the people who got out of World War II, the veterans, they were really treated right. They could go to college. Actually, going to college was better than working if you didn't have a skill. They paid about $150 a month, paid your tuition, bought your books, and if you was working, the minimum wage was 75 cents an hour. That's a net gross $35 a week, probably a net of 30. So you're better off going to school. And we had a huge number of men and women that went to college during that time. And we had it again after the Korean War, and then when I went in service, it wasn't available, but before, in the Vietnam War, they brought it back. And so I used it for graduate school. So we need to think about what's best, what's in the national interest. In the national interest, what's best for all of us, and not just what's best for me. And as long as we think selfishly, everybody wants a tax cut. And if we just think about it a little bit, if we give everybody a substantial tax cut, that's a huge revenue loss. A huge revenue loss. loss. And then if you structure it in such a way that just the rich will get it, that's still a revenue loss, but not as great as giving everybody. And you cut spending for education, you don't keep up your infrastructure. Right now, Texas and the National Federal Highways Trust Fund is not enough money coming from gasoline taxes to maintain the roads. So we got to do something different. And I don't think toll roads is the best way to do it, but that's the way we seem to be going. And you've got to understand the whole economy is interrelated. One of the things, cars are more efficient. They may get 10, 15, 20% more efficiency. So you buy less gas. And for the same amount of driving, you buy less gas. So that's less money going into the trust fund. And that's just one way to say that the whole thing is interconnected, and we need to think about what's best for all of us and not just what's best for a few of us. And that's one of the things to do. This is reality in government by the rich, for the rich, and of the rich. And the death of the true representative democracy. The working class feel that things have been rigged. These are people that don't understand what's happening to them, but they know something is hurting. Some people can be persuaded that culprit is big government, and they have this sign: government, big government, bad government, smaller government. And you ask, well, do you want Social Security? Oh yes, want Social Security. But they don't want big government. Well, Social Security is a huge organization, and it has to be a huge organization for what it's doing. And it's a very, very complex program. I just worked in one part of Medicare. Very, very complex. And you've got to have pretty good minds to deal with that program. Some people can be persuaded that the culprit is well, but others blame the fall on the wealthy and big corporations. The result is fierce partisanship, fueled by anti-establishment populism on both the right and the left. And that's pretty much what we are right now. The House of Representatives is, we pay them pretty good salaries. But if you worked as less as they have this year, what do you think your employer would do? Would fire you. But they on vacation all the time, they'll pass fewer laws in the last 4 years and probably any time in the history. When Truman said a do-nothing Congress back in the 40s, they passed much more legislation, helpful legislation then than they are now. And so this is a paradox. If those of us who have been taught to think, if we don't apply that in a kind of a national way, looking at what's best for all of us, create an opportunity for everybody to be successful if they do what they're supposed to do. Many people feel, well, you can't have that kind of system. Everybody can't be successful. You got to have 6 or 7% unemployment. And there's a large part of the segments believes that, but that will hurt the purchasing power. The flattening of the income stems from structure change in the workforce, the twin forces of globalization and labor replacement technology that began to hit the American workforce like a hurricane. Improvements in transportation radically reduced the cost of producing goods anywhere in the world. Now, one of the reasons that some companies are bringing stuff back to the United States is because of the transportation costs. And so they can use technology and they can be competitive. Robert Reich wrote a book about the new American economy a few years ago, and most of what I'm talking about came from an article that he recently written. Is that we must think and behave differently in order for this nation to continue as we all hope for. Putting a downward pressure on wages, automation followed by computers, software, robotics, computer-controlled machine tools, and digitalization further eroded the job and wages, which undermines organized labor. Now, I'll give an example of that. I used to think Wisconsin A large number of people had that from sleep. And I thought they were, and much of the social welfare programs started at the University of Wisconsin. Unemployment, income support, all that started there. They have one of the better schools of social work in the country. And when they elected the governor they have right now, and he wanted to deny public employees the right to organize. And it was hard for me to understand that, but I guess everybody can get greedy. But the Koch brothers are located in Wisconsin, and they put a lot of money in. So this is what they're buying. And they want a system where you have rich people and poor people. And that's what they're working towards. And if the masses of people in America don't wake up, that's what's going to happen to us. We need to just wake up and stop. And another thing that causes this problem is that we are, classism, racism, they use these as what I call peripheral issues. Abortion, women's rights, voting rights, all that's designed to divide people. And we lock into one camp or the other camp, and it hurts us all. And so that's something I think we need to get away with. There's no silver bullet to solve this problem. That's not one thing, and Robert Rice, he gives 10 things that think we ought to do. So I'm going to look at what we might be able to do. How can we alleviate the preceding inequalities and create a better equilibrium? Make work pay. If a job needs to be done, it ought to pay a living wage. If it doesn't need to be done, don't put it out there. It's not welfare, but there's a lot of jobs, just like people who pick up the trash. That's critical. People that clean the buildings. If you go into a dirty building, you don't feel like working. They ought to be paid enough so they can participate, so they can send their children to school, so they can afford health insurance, so they can afford a home, and things like that. And I don't think that's too much to ask. The rich can still be rich. But the average American is not concerned about being rich, but they do want to be comfortable. They want to be able to make some economic decisions themselves. But the way the system is right now is stacked against them. The fastest growing category of work are retail, restaurants, healthcare, childcare, and elderly care. But these jobs tend to pay very little. We should raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour and index it to inflation. Expand the earned income tax credit. If a job is needed, it should pay a living wage. So that's one of the recommendations that will help. Unionize low-wage workers. If those people who worked in restaurants and health, I'm not talking about nurses, doctors, and technicians. I'm talking about the people that clean the building. There's more of them than there are nurses. They keep the building clean, maintain the building, maintenance and all that kind of stuff, which is important. They couldn't function without it, but they don't pay them nothing. And so I'm saying if they were permitted to organize labor union, you got to pay them more. It will cost a little bit more money, but the net will be a benefit to all of us. The net will be a benefit to all of us. So so we unionize low-wage workers, and the fastest growing unions are in the public sector right now. But what's going on in Wisconsin and other states is bringing that to a halt. And we think they're going to pay us just because they want to do right. We're dreaming. They will do what they have to do. That's what we got to look at. The state and local governments to prevent collective bargaining of public sector employees. We need to create an environment that encourages union, beginning with low-wage service occupation that are sheltered from globalization. They can't send that job to clean the hospital to China or to nowhere else. It has to be done here. And there are a lot of jobs just that way. So that's what we need to be thinking about. The third thing we need to do is invest in education. We should consider education as a national investment in our nation's future and not as expense. Now look what we did in Texas. In 2011, reduced public education spending by $5 billion. We had the money in the emergency fund, the rainy day fund, but we chose not to tap it. And if it hadn't been for the Economic Recovery Act in 2009, it would have happened in 2009. But the money that was the states received from the Economic Recovery Act, they were able to maintain everything the way it was. Ordinarily in government, we don't do it that way. You can't supplant what you're supposed to do with federal funds in most cases, but apparently they could in this particular case. So we need to stop using education to attract to prison. And I know I've worked in the classroom, and you can get very, very disappointed as a classroom teacher. That was my second job after graduation. I taught at a public school 5 years in Wichita Falls, Texas. And you could have 3 bad actors and you lose your whole class. And I don't know what the real answer is, but I know what we have done, particularly beginning with desegregation, is a large ratio of the Latinos and African Americans who are put in alternative classes. They don't leave nowhere or expelled. And they can't learn if they're not in the classroom. And in the summer one, I taught a course of the Office of Cedar Valley at a school in Dallas has Catherine Gilliam's technical. If you graduate from there, you're supposed to have a high school diploma and a associate degree, 60 hours towards a degree. And they start taking college level course after they finish their sophomore year. So I had a class, this test, got scored. They don't have the slow students in those courses. And so I had a class in government. They completed their sophomore year in May of 2014, and they started in June taking this course and a couple other college level courses. They could recall, they were smart, but they can't think. And they can't write. And that's what you've got to do in today's economy. And so they earned, most of them earned, I didn't have anything lower than a C. And I had about 5 or 6 A's out of about 16 students. But I didn't feel, I gave them an outline, I gave them 60 questions, and I would ask 45 from that. So any student with a little ingenuity would have made an A. Because when I was in college, they didn't tell you what they was going to ask on the test. You had to figure it out. But I thought it would have been better to give them, if they learn all these 60 questions, that's a good much information at the end of the year. But, so that's what we need to do. We need to train students so that they can, for the jobs that exist. In some organization, whether it's a private, public, need to be telling students students don't really know what they are to major in. They are majoring and say, well, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse. And they do that because those positions, you probably have more opportunities as a teacher, but very few students want to be teachers. Because it's a hard job. It's the hardest job I ever had. But there's a great deal of reward, because if you can survive it, the students are always coming back to you and tell you how much you helped them afterwards. And so that's I have students who are almost as old as I am now, coming back and say, you really helped me. And I have students that took a government course from me at Cedar Valley, so I went on, you encouraged me, I went on, I got my bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree. So it's a lot of, if you can stick around, but if you're teaching 9th and 10th grade students, you don't get much feedback from them. It's 11th and 12th grades, because if they go into college, they begin to think, well, I better be ready for it. Okay, the next thing we need to invest in is infrastructure. In Texas, we have a lot of dams that the Corps of Engineers built. And we have the second largest highway system in the nation. Probably the first, because we are the second population-wise, second geographically. Alaska's larger, but they don't have the people, so they don't need the highway system we have in Texas. California has the largest population right now, but I went to a meeting today talking about public education, and we had someone from San Francisco and someone from New York talking about problems. And you can't live in San Francisco if you don't have money. I was through there about 10 years ago, and 1,000 square feet condo was costing like $4,000 or $5,000 a month for rent. So that's most people, a large number of people don't earn $4,000. So poor people don't live in San Francisco. They go to Oakland, and it's a little better there in some of the other places. But the infrastructure, our highway system, cities that have a good infrastructure is attractive to companies that want to relocate. And the education system, the infrastructure is what causes companies to move and relocate to major cities. We used to give them tax advantages to come, and we have done a great deal in Dallas. We lost the Cowboy Stadium because of the mayor in Dallas. So someone needs to think, what's best for the city of Dallas? What's best for the nation? And not based on ideology or how someone feels about something. How do we pay for these investments? Now, I don't know I think we're all going to have to pay higher taxes. But I think we need to have a fair tax system. And, just to soak it to the rich. But rich people are paying less than they were 50 years ago. You used to have to pay based on the ability to pay. If you made up in money, you were paying 70% of what the taxable income is. Now, if you have a business, and I've observed, I have a few relatives that had businesses, and everything they own, everything, the house, the car they drive, everything is owned by the business. So they write all that off. So they don't pay as much taxes as I do. But the system provides for it because the people with the money, that's what they want. But we need to have a fair system so we all pay. And if we pay people a living wage, then they'll be paying into it. And volume helps a great deal. So Robert argues that we need to, they do need to pay more. They do need to pay more. We had some kind of a trade-off with the budget deal we had a couple of years ago, and where you make $4,000 and above, then you start paying $400,000. After $400,000, then you start paying more. The tax they had one time to ensure that you pay at least a minimum amount, they didn't index it, so it's hurting people who are middle class. They got to pay that tax now, and they haven't abolished it. They should have indexed it or abolished it, and have a fair tax system so everybody pays it. This next one is kind of complicated. It said make the payroll tax progressive. Income taxes are progressive while the Social Security tax is regressive. Let me explain what that means. Everybody pays that 7.5% for Social Security. It doesn't matter how much, on the upper end, if it's above 110,000, you stop. But that's a regressive tax. And a regressive tax hurt the working people more than it hurt the affluent. The sales tax in Texas is a regressive tax. And all the time you can't write it off. Now, if you have a state income tax, you can always write that off against your federal income tax. So these are the kind of things you need to work with. And the other things is how you tax equities compared to income, unearned income. Even if they were paying 5 or 6% for CDs and those kind of products, the income tax is pretty onerous because you got to pay just like you do for earned income. Now, if you got equities, the capital gain is like 15%. The average person who earns $40,000 or $50,000 a year, they're the 25% bracket. You see the difference? And so that's, to me, is unfair. If it's money, net money, everybody ought to pay the same. And the same kind of, if you're dealing with real estate also. So these are some of the unfairness that exists in the system. He argues that, this is based on the assumption that all these things are accepted, like, you pay everybody $15 an hour, but $15 an hour will give you, $30,000 a year, about $31,000 a year. That's not a lot of money right now. What you got to, rent and stuff like that, transportation, food. Yeah, that's not a lot of money. But he says they already started at 15, don't pay nothing until you get above 15,000. And then that would take care of wages and make up the difference by removing the cap on portion of income subject to Social Security payroll tax. Like if you make $500,000, you only pay Social Security on $110,000, and the rest is free. So I think, but you get two different arguments. You say, well, if you're rich, you ought to handle it different. But if you pay the 7.5% and you make $1 million, whatever that equal to, you already get it. That's, to me, is fair. But there's an argument against that, and that's what makes it. But we as citizens, we got to try to understand what's there and what's best for the nation, and create a fair, open system so we all can be successful based on our own expectation. That's it. Okay, I'm ready for them. Yes.
Wait for the microphone.
I think if I heard you correctly, you made a comment that AIG wants to sue the federal government.
They argued that. Well, because they were saying the federal government should not be involved in private enterprise, and the only way we got involved was we purchased a huge chunk of their stock, and when it's, because of that, they were able to stay in business, and the stock went way up, and we sold. And the government, the taxpayers, had a material capital gain. And that's what they were arguing, but they backed down. They didn't actually sue. They would sue. They were just talking. It wasn't all of them. It was just, I think the board was talking about that. Yes.
So, but it's just the way it worked out when AIG was going to collapse, bankruptcy,
Yes.
and that we bailed them out
By buying their stock.
by buying their stock, and so they are still a viable business.
They're very successful now.
Now they're very successful, and because we saved them, they wanted to sue us because we made a profit off of it.
Yes. They didn't do it. The media kind of weighed in on that and made it seem absurd, and they kind of backed away. And so, but it was, I just couldn't understand why they would have the audacity to do that.
It's called arrogance.
Yeah. Any more questions?
You have any more? Who's next? There we go.
Would you just comment on the what I call transfer of wealth business strategies from like Walmart, and where it's essentially we're housing and feeding, Walmart employees, for the stakeholders of Walmart.
Okay, I mentioned that in that Walmart's announced it was going to relocate its home office to a country where the taxes are much less than what they are in the United States. Walgreens. Oh, you want Walmart? You talking about?
Yeah.
Well,
Taxpayers $1 to $2 million a year every time a super center goes in place. Every year.
Taxpayers.
We're feeding and housing Walmart employees, and the people are getting wealthy on that.
The company is.
Are the stockholders.
Yes.
Stockholders.
Yes. They're getting wealthy on it.
That's a transfer of wealth business strategy.
They would say that.
Transferring from the middle class and lower class to the stakeholders of Walmart, and they're not the only ones that are doing that.
They all do that. just like I indicated earlier, if a company is talking about we're going to relocate and we go after them, we give them a huge tax advantage, and for them to relocate here, and that may, their sales are down. Walmart sales are down. They are down. But again, everything is interrelated. That will mean some people who are working may not be earning much, may not be working, because the first thing a company does is lay off people. I'm not saying it needs to be a better system of dealing with that, but when you think about it, the people who create the environment for that are the people with money. And then they get us confused with ideology or other peripheral issues, and we get bogged down in that, and in many cases vote for political candidates whose policy will hurt us. And so that's what I'm saying. We need to wake up, because we do have a remedy with a constitution or representative democracy. If we get together and decide we're going to do what's best for the nation, we can change it. And we saw some examples of that in 2012. Carl Rose Group, everybody they support lost. So we have the votes if we will apply them. If we don't throw up our hands and surrender or get caught up, some people will vote for a candidate just because he's pro-life. And that don't have nothing to do with the economy. It probably, if a person want to make that decision, if they didn't make that decision, then we'd have to pay child support, child welfare for that child. So that really hurts us. I know humanistic, and that sounds cold, but that's the realities of it.
Calvin, without being impolite, do you think that there's anybody really worth voting for in this country?
Well, what I look at, I've never been able to vote for someone that I 100% supported. And so what I've done, and that's the only thing I can recommend to anybody else, I vote for the lesser of the evil. That's how I vote. And I think if you do that long enough, then people will change. I think politicians do what they think will get them elected. And if we don't do that, then it's going to be a situation. I know if you look at the extremes of the two parties, say, well, it's death either way you go.
Oh, sure. Keep it up.
Don't you think that the two parties have been moving away in terms of their philosophy from the general opinion of the public, almost as if they don't care what the ordinary people think? Do you agree on that?
Yes, they are. They both are. Both parties get money from the rich. And, we look at historically, starting with President Roosevelt, it seemed like we created a system where it appeared to be more fair than it is now. And we thought the Democrats, but, since the mid-60s, the attitudes of the two parties switched. I remember when Republicans were fairly good people. And I mean, in Dallas, they joined African Americans for the single member vote, for state legislatures and all that. And they were the party of Lincoln. Yeah, but the Democrats was the hurt. But they switched. And you still is a lesser of the evils. That's all I can look at. But when I look at the platform of the Republican Party in Texas, would any reasonable person vote for a Republican based on that party platform?
No.
And, and when you look at the Republican Party platform on the national level in 2012, reasonable people couldn't support that. And that's perhaps why they lost. Historically, when the economy is down, the president's in power loses. But it didn't happen this time. And I think the Occupy Wall Street had an impact. They say it was nonpartisan, and they were children of middle-class families, and they said, well, they looked and said, no, this is what's hurting me, and they voted differently. If it hadn't been for that, things may have been different.
There was a few old people in there too.
Oh yeah. But majority of us old folks voted for the Republican.
Well, I hope you're not the majority, my friend. Let me ask you a question. You said that the Republicans were just wonderful people. Well, wait a second. Let me finish my question. I may be embellishing a little bit, but you're saying they went with the African Americans, they helped them along, they were the party of Lincoln. What do you think changed that? Lyndon Johnson and the Voter Rights Act? Lyndon Johnson said, I have just given the South to the Republican Party. And the whole thing is, we're seeing a resurgency of racism, the way I see it, tremendously again. And it's overt, not covert.
Of course. All you got to do is look at what happened in Ferguson this week. That's a good example of what has happened. Voter ID, that's not, if you look at the history of corruption in politics, Republicans probably were more corrupt than Democrats. And particularly in Texas, there's no voter fraud that's going on that's material. And this is only designed to hit the people who vote normally Democratic. Young college students who move around. So you can have a gun permit, this what you call not the weapons that's shown, but you can use that and vote, but you can't use a college ID and vote. You got to have it's got to be something. You got to have the driver's license, and then the next thing is the address on the driver's license has to match the voter ID. So that's designed because they know young people move a lot, and so they know that will pull them away. And older people, if you got to go get a birth certificate. If you're real old, that's hard. My mother never worked, and when my father retired to get her Social Security, she had to have a birth certificate. And I worked hard to finally got it, but it took a lot of effort. And sometimes you got to have witnesses, and all the witnesses are dead, so you're in trouble. So that's a problem that hurts older people who normally vote Democratic. So they're doing it to hurt the people, the minorities and the Hispanics who are Latinos, who a large number of them not citizens, so they can't vote anyway. And they try to argue that they are coming up with some kind of scheme that they register and vote for Democrats. It's all not true. It's a lie they say about it. The people here are illegal. They don't get no real welfare. They can go to Parkland. They don't ask the question, are you here illegal? That's we don't ask, in the healthcare, we don't ask that question, but there are other people who do. Yes.
Yeah, right here. Maybe clarify or help me to understand what you said a few minutes ago, that we need to continue with all the abortions that we're doing, because if we don't, we're going to end up having to pay for all the child welfare.
I didn't really advocate that. I said economically it would be more economically for the state. My position on that is the state should not have anything to say about that. The religious people can. They should influence people to do it. Because as I understand religion, and I'm not a theologian, I may be corrected, you can sin or not sin. You can sin or not sin. That's the individual choice. And when you tell a woman you can't have an abortion if she wants to have one, that's coercion. And so I think the coercion is wrong. No, I was just saying if you want to look at it what was economically. No, I'm not advocating abortion. And I don't think most people who will say they are pro-choice is advocating. They're saying that you have a choice, and the state should not have there's many other things you ought to be doing, and wasting resources and make it difficult for people to do it. To do it, No, I wouldn't advocate it.
Well, I just want to follow the logic. You said economically, and you said it 2 or 3 times. Economically, some of us are a terrible drain on the economics. We're getting all this Social Security and Medicare. We're not producing anything, and we're an enormous drain. Maybe if a whole bunch of us were just aborted right now, it would save the country a lot of money.
I wouldn't advocate that. but I wouldn't advocate it. Let me say it.
The fallacy is in the economics of saying aborting children is somehow economically a good idea. That is a terrible, that is a flaw.
If I let you believe that that's what I'm saying, I was saying, if the point I should have dwelled on it more. The point is that I was trying to say, I don't think abortion is a thing the state ought to be involved in. I think the church, the religious people should be using to influence people to make the right choice, not coerce them to do something. But see, many people will argue economic issues. The way I said it, you're correctly right. I said it that if a person had an abortion, then you wouldn't have to pay for 18 years that person. But I'm not advocating that. My point is the state should not be involved, and that the individual should make the choice, not me. Or I shouldn't be able to tell your daughter you can't have an abortion. That should be her choice, not mine.
This is similar, but I'm not going to touch that argument with a 10-foot pole. But you have, speaking of churches and theologies, we have certain rules about who's, because religious organizations get a tax break, and they're not supposed to be dictating public policy from the pulpit. But I know so many people who have been in fact, they've gone the other way on religion because they feel offended by some of the against women, against gays, things that are coming from the pulpit. And the right, especially, is manipulating people. So in other words, you're getting political messages from a place they're not supposed to be coming, in addition to the corporations that are people. You've got great religious, these big churches that are also acting, it's against the best interest of the very people that they're talking to.
Well, that was probably what I was alluding to when I said that. Is that I just wandered off into the economic issue. Probably I should not have. Yeah. Well, I've had a real experience of that. I'm a Presbyterian, and where our church is just about look like it's going down the tube over ordination of gays and lesbians and what have you. And one of the largest churches is pulled out of the Presbyterian Church USA, and it's happening all over major cities in the United States. And the number of Presbyterians in the Presbyterian Church USA is declining pretty rapidly. And it's because of theological difference on those particular two issues. I tend to believe that it's something else in there, because I've been a Presbyterian a long time, and when the two churches, the Southern and the Northern Church, was not together, and we came back together in the 80s. And I went to a General Assembly as a commissioner in 96, and then I went in 86, and I went again in 96. And we came up with a policy to treat heterosexual people the same way as we do the gay community. And that if our position was being gay in of itself is not a sin, but practicing it is. And to live in infidelity is a sin also. So if a person was living in infidelity, they couldn't be ordained. If a person was practicing gayism, they couldn't be ordained. But the gay community never would accept that. And they kept on until they got it pretty much the way they wanted. And so that is still the issues that most people are leaving, is because they say we're not operating consistent with the Word and the Bible.
Mr. Bluiett.
Yes.
Mayor Rollins has been very proud of his Grow South program.
Yes.
And I was very interested in what you said about the warehouse jobs not being as labor intensive as they used to be. And one of the programs that they're doing is building 6 or 8 warehouses in the southern sector.
That's all they're building out there.
And I mean, on I-20 they have this very ugly concrete structure going up, which I assume is one of those warehouses. And you're thinking, when they first talked about those southern port, it was supposed to bring something like 6,000 jobs to the southern sector, and all of a sudden these machinations that they've gone through.
Well, the goal,
are we going to get any jobs?
The goal is still to do that, but the thing is, we've had a recession, and if you look at North Dallas, there's nowhere else to go. If you go to North Dallas, there's really nowhere else to go because it's all pretty used up as far as land. The land in the city of Dallas, in the southern part of the city, and that's still a goal. But unless we can get some manufacturing plants to locate out there, and I've talked with some people from TI years ago, but they said what they produce, you got to have such a huge investment in the plant or the facility, and they weren't willing to make that type of investment in the southern part of the city. I think it's still a goal, but it's hard to reach. They have what they call an urban center on Lancaster, just north of the Veterans Hospital. It's a huge building. It's an apartment building, and I don't know. I tried to get my son to move there, and he said, no, he wouldn't come into South Dallas. So I don't know. You know, they're doing something, but it's slow. And
I question what the real plan is when our schools in the southern sector are falling apart. They're utterly grotesque in terms of what the children are getting. The discipline is horrific, and they don't have teachers. They have substitutes, permanent subs, and then they have our man downtown getting ready to go to, or being so, bothered that he can't function. What is the real plan here? I mean, it looks...
Now, we got to kind of separate this. The city is one entity, and Mayor Wallen is trying to push that, but he was also pushing the home rule thing. And so he and I disagree so vehemently, so I'm so angry. I haven't talked to him about it because I want to be civil. But I didn't expect this from him. And you're right. What's happening in Dallas, I've been here 44 years, is that most of the middle class African Americans are moving to the southern suburbs. You have as many African Americans in Lancaster together collectively in Lancaster, Duncanville, Cedar Hill, Red Oak as we have in Dallas. On the northern side, you have as many whites in Plano, Richardson, and all those other northern communities as you have in the city of Dallas. So they're both moving for the same reason. Yes. And but when you look at the outcomes of Lancaster, DeSoto, Cedar Hill, I don't know about Red Oak, but the outcomes are about the same as they are in Dallas. So what you have as far as the African American students, if you look at the number that's in alternative education and all those other programs, it's a high ratio of Latinos and African Americans, particularly men, young men. And in the African American community, only people that live in Dallas is people like me. My children, my babies are 42, and I'm not going to move unless it gets terrible. But my area is going to actually get better because if North Texas campus is just below me, and they have a police station just below me, so it's going to get better. It is no worse as far as burglary than perhaps the northern communities are right now. So I'm not moving. So, but that's not happening. And really, people 65 years old, we don't pay. If your home is not valued over $100,000, what we pay for property tax is minimal, very, very minimal. And so it's economical for me to stay where I am. But that's what's happening. And so you don't have any mentors for the young men, and you don't have any people they can look at and say, I want to do what they're doing. And what those young people encounter in their lives, in their short lives, is more than most of us have encountered, I have encountered in my 77 years. So that's detrimental. And I observed that when I was teaching in Wichita Falls. The young people was skeptical in, 11th to 12th grade students, more skeptical than I was. Is because they had to deal with things I didn't have to deal with. And so that's a problem. And education, if you don't have the educational skills, then probably companies are going to move there. But I do think eventually they will, because that's the only place to go unless they go to further south. Waxahachie has a lot of industrial activity down there, and even not Athens, but the place down just north of Corsicana. They seem to have a lot of industry there, those small communities. Yes.
So my question is pretty simple. I'm wondering if you're aware of the recent fact that's been put out by CNN that says since 1978, the minimum wage, real value of the minimum wage, has actually dropped by 25%, but the cost of a college degree has risen by 1,120%. So I guess the question is, how then can someone, a young person, a middle-aged person who wants to go back to school, how can someone afford to go back to college if they have no access to grants? Or I was very lucky. My employer paid for me to go to college. Some employers do have tuition reimbursement programs. But, given that minimum wage, somebody is trying so hard to just make ends meet.
They can't go to college. They can't go to college. And this is what I'm probably being clear in my earlier remarks. If you're poor, you're not expected to go to college.
Do you think that's
deliberate? That's very unwise, because we need to educate everybody that we can educate. And that would be good for the total community, not only good for them, but it help the whole community.
Do you, I guess you don't have to answer this, do you believe that that's a deliberate setup?
When you look at the structure of education, segregation, desegregation, and it's, if I hadn't followed my students, my children, being PTA president and all that stuff until they finish high school, they may not have graduated. And I wasn't poor. DISD was that bad.
Wow.
And so when you look at that, the expectation, and it's not limited just to white teachers. There are students that went to college with me whose child was in the school where my child was, at Robert L. Thornton. And she said to me once after the PTA meeting, "Black people can't learn." I said, "Are you white?" She said, "No." I said, "Did you learn?" "Yes." And it kind of blew my mind. I couldn't figure that out. She could learn, she was black, but black people can't learn. But it's a reason for that. Most, after the slavery kind of decision, a large number of blacks go to graduate school at a white school. I did too, because I felt it would be better for me, and it was. And then if you buy that total package, you come out thinking the same way everybody else does. And so when I thought about that, and she had done the same thing, we both went to Prairie View, and I think she went to East Texas State, and I went to North Texas. So it's hard to get out of those graduate degrees with a master or a PhD if you don't think the way they think. It's hard. And and you go through it, almost like acting. You got to be real at it. So I think that was the expectation. I think it's changing. But we're going to have to do a lot of work to overcome it, because so many young people don't believe that. They don't believe that. And if they don't believe it, it's hard for a teacher. And with the testing system, too many tests, and the teacher got to teach the test, they appraise on the basis of the test, and I think that's not wise, because when I was a teacher, I was a new teacher, so I got the worst students, and so my results was going to be worse, because I didn't have the experience, and I had the worst students. I hope they have moved beyond that now, but I'm not certain they are. But we came up with a system before Dr. Rojas became superintendent, that we had a plan, and we opted out, or we were able to get an exception from the state on evaluation, teacher appraisals. And we looked at, you start where the students are, and you work with them. As long as they make progress, that's progress. They aren't going to recover 2 years in 1 year. But if they make, if they're making progress, then that's progress, and then the appraisal would reflect that. So what I think it's changing. I think more people are recognizing that, we have a large, probably 10% of students have emotional problems, and it's growing. And that's a dependent class of people we're going to have to take care of in the future. And I think more and more people think we need to educate. Everybody can be educated. I believe that. That's the way I sense it right now. Are there other questions?
Right of questions. You get to eat now.
What's that?
I think you got it.
Oh, okay.
Calvin,
I'm a success.
Calvin, what effect on inequality do you think multinational corporations have when they move their headquarters from the United States to a country overseas?
It has a major impact. I dealt with globalization has been one of the causes of inequality. Because a large number of people who used to work in factories, unionized, people at GM, we had one gentleman work for steel mill. And, he's been retired a good while. He said he was earning $30 an hour. And so the core of the middle class was in the manufacturing that were unionized, because teachers wouldn't do it. And I had a brother who was a roofer. He earned more in 6 months than I did in a year. Another worked for Mobile, and he earned a great deal. So I worked a number of years before I caught up with them, and I had a master's degree. So that's where the big core of the middle class was in. And a large number of those men were skilled at working for that factory. If they lost that job, they couldn't get another one, because unless it was a similar type company.
I have another question. Speaking of unions, since recent decades, a certain party has made it public that they want to put an end to unions. What effect does that have, in your opinion, to inequality in this country?
It has a huge effect. Everything was never unionized in the United States. It's basically manufacturing and chemical companies, things. Those were the ones that were unionized, in transportation, truckers. So the largest number of employees were not there. The people that we're talking about, the low-income people, low-paying jobs in hospitals and other organizations like that, and even teachers. But what the union was doing serve as a catalyst to make it better for everybody. And if we don't have them, then there's nobody. The unions were pretty powerful. And when the F&L CIO, I was a senior in high school, and so my question was, now, are we going to have a Labor Party in the United States like we have in England? It didn't.
I have another question. Mike.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention, since you're still up, there was an article in yesterday's paper about teachers and principals cheating on the tests and being fired. And this is before the new evaluation thing comes into play. I think we are going to see more of that rather than less, even though people get fired, because people are going to be desperate.
Well, the sense okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
They have developed, I mean, there are hundreds of these people who are going into charter programs. The uplift is all over the Metroplex. And I think this is what the whole idea of this man who came in from Colorado, getting rid of 34% of his teachers, coming into Dallas to do the same thing, Mike Miles. And he's done a lot of that because, I mean, people have, in droves, gotten out of Dodge because he's a bully and he trains his principals to be bullies. Now, there are still some good principals, good schools in Dallas, but we see this happening, and we see children who are on that pipeline, basically in the southern sector. A Mr. Tovar at Sunset was pushed out after they had raised the graduation rate there of the Hispanic students predominantly with a special program. They had worked with it for a decade. He and the whole program was dismantled. And they are bragging about the graduation rate that was created. But let's see what happens next year and the year after, now that he's gotten rid of the program. It wasn't Mike Miles doing in the first place. And the same thing with Madison and Lincoln, where he got rid of the principals who knew how to handle the kids and put people in who couldn't. Now, we are stuck with him. I mean, what's up with this school board?
I don't know. I don't know what's up with the school board. That's a real dilemma, the issue that you pointed out. And that the thing is, we're all human beings. And if they say, my appraisal is going to be based on the test scores, I'm going to teach the test. And that's where, and even though I may lose my job, but I'm going to lose it anyway. And that's how I think teachers rationalize, because if I was in their position, that's the way I would look at it. We test too much. My thing is the curriculum ought to be the thing that drives it. If you got the right curriculum and you go through that at the end of that, you ought to be there. But we don't have the right kind of curriculum, and we have all kinds of things to make students in the public school basically ignorant. And the State Board of Education is a major part of that. They want to control what's in history books, what's in science books, and most of them are not historians or scientists. And it's my understanding they don't teach civics in high school no more because it's too liberal.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, so I say that I hold us responsible as voters. Whatever things that we have that cause us to be polarized, we must get beyond it and try to do what's best for all of us and not just for a few.
Don't make Calvin get up.
No, I'm not going to do that again. Yeah, we're into rebuttal. All right, now it's your turn to talk. Who wants to be first? rebut our speaker or to add or subtract to our speaker? Ray?
Anybody else?
Well, I love coming here because, as my wife says, well, you can go and bore somebody else for a change. So, but I've been a 46-year-old observer of the American scene, and it's really gone down the drain a lot. When I came, really, it was wonderful to be here. I mean, everybody was working. We couldn't believe how cheap it was. The benefits were great. I worked for a great company. A secretary could earn a wage, own a car, rent an apartment. I mean, it was wonderful. But that was too good for some people. That was just too good for some people. So there was a pushback. They didn't like the idea that people could have a say. They just didn't like that. So you had a pushback from these people, and you've seen the results. Now, I've looked at these people. You know, I consider myself at least the equal of these people, if not better. Okay, I mean, I was my professor at Imperial, which is one of the top colleges in England, was horrified when I challenged Lord Bluiett. Now, Lord Bluiett discovered the positron. I mean, he was head of the Royal Society. My beef is everybody should be challenged. Now, I think the problem of America is we live in a hierarchical society where we're taught to, you must listen to your betters. You must listen to the pulpit. You must, we cannot earn a good living if we're in fear of speaking up and challenging everything. Now, as I've said many times, I believe in an industrial democracy. We should all be part of, the biggest thing in life is working. Now, look, the lowest guy on the totem pole, knows what he's doing, basically. You have to trust him. But these guys at the top, basically, we used to regard them, the top guys in Xerox, as empty vests. Because basically they were salesmen or bean counters. Now, what does salesmen do? Well, in Xerox it was, well, you must copy someone else. Well, we came out with a PC. They said, well, make it just like IBM's, okay? Or the bean counter, what do? Oh, we must cut costs. Now, to illustrate this, Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple, but he came back because they needed him. What did he do? He didn't say we must cut costs. He said we must innovate. We must use our brains. Now, every person is worth something in this world, and the job of a country is to make everybody, productive and rise to their full potential. We must create jobs. We must set up a mechanism that creates jobs for people, not just ships jobs overseas for no purpose. Now, unless America is headed for a big crash, there's no question about it. You cannot run up a 12 to 15 trillion deficit with the rest of the world and think they're going to stand that forever. They won't. When China has stolen all of America's secrets and has owned everything around the world, they'll have no use for America or anything to do with it. Now, the astounding stupidity of the foreign policy of America is astounding. And to think these people know anything is a huge mistake. Now, you have two parties, I said. I couldn't vote for any of them. And I go back to England, same story. We had the so-called New Labour Party. It was run firstly by Blair, who was a charlatan, and then by Brown, who was next to a moron. These people, now, and that is the truth. That is the truth. I don't. Yeah, that's what my friends say. Tell me what you really feel. Well, look, I only kept my job at Xerox because I delivered. Otherwise, I'd have been fired long ago. Because because my feeling was, if you're as good as me, fine. If you're not, sit down. And I told my new boss, I told him to sit down. This was my meeting. It should be quiet. Because I don't run my meeting like that. So, look, America must wake up from the American dream and it's been in. it has got to recognize that this laissez-faire system doesn't work. You can't let things run wild. You must start planning. I mean, when we started off with a project in Dallas, we all sat down and we planned it. You know, I mean, we came up with a budget and we knew where we were going. You can't just hope to hell that something marvelous will happen, because it won't. Now, what is happening to the US? It's becoming more and more like Greece, okay, which is a disaster. And so if you look at Greece, you look at Greece, you have a top tier of very rich people, okay, and the rest are very, very poor. The rich people didn't pay any taxes, and so the poor country, you know, ran aground. I mean, it could not, and it was poured into the EU with a completely ridiculous economic system. Now, that's the way the US is going. So really, I don't know who it's going to be, but they've got to step back, look at everything that's going on in this country, and, you know, rework it. I mean, the Supreme Court is a joke, you know, and I think Congress is a joke. The presidential elections are a joke, a 2-year farce, you know. So the whole thing has got to be looked at and reworked, really, because I think people are now really, this damn thing is broken. Really, they do. And so there must be a revivalist party, a progressive party that stands and says, this is not good enough, folks. We're going over the cliff and we've got to resurrect our country.
John doesn't take questions. Come on up here.
Well, I just wanted him to give a talk on that for one of these sessions.
Don't worry, he will.
He's a scheduled speaker.
Yeah.
He's had this many times. In fact, he really, like his wife says, he bores us.
Okay, who wants to be next?
We've got one right here.
Oh, come on, Ray.
John is good about telling us a lot of jokes. Shotgun approach here to a bunch of little subjects here. A lot of the offices of big corporations are being moved overseas. We have the highest corporate tax rate of any industrialized country. I think it's something like 35%. There's no reason for corporations to stay here if they're going to be taxed that much.
That.
Patriotism.
Okay, we only have one. The idea here is one fool at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
You and I. You and I take every last possible deduction and exemption that we can. And we would be wise to do that. We sometimes go to a CPA to see if he can find us new ways of legally saving us money so we don't have to pay taxes. Why can't a corporation do that too? And if they feel like this country is so unfriendly, to tax them like that, whatever taxes they pay, they will go somewhere else. And they cannot be blamed for doing it any more than we would be blamed for taking our exemptions. He said something about people that don't have jobs where there's a demand. Well, duh. Of course, if the people do not have any kind of a skill, if you can say, well, he's really good at repairing typewriters, I'm sorry, there isn't a demand for that. Some of the college degrees are so absolutely worthless that people can't find jobs with those. In other words, they are unmarketable degrees. Public schools. The cost per child has gone up. The quality has gone down. We all agree with that. So it is obvious that the reason, the problem with public schools is not money. There's plenty of problems, but it isn't money. Citizens United and more money in politics. Republicans would be able to give all the money they want to a candidate. Democrats can give all the money they want to the candidate of their choice. And that is equality. just another, you want to have more money for yourself, and you and I want to have a better life. We all want to get ahead. We want to do better, don't we? That is not greed. You and I are not in a position to tell somebody else that they are greedy. That just sounds like sour grapes. We can't judge somebody else's motives. I think we need more rich people. I want to see more rich people. They do not tax me. They do not regulate me. They do not pose any threat to me. I suggest they don't pose any threat to you. And to complain and carp over rich people is another case of sour grapes. With that foodie sounding comment, I'll sit down. Thanks.
Thank you, Ray. I never thought you would get up so I could get up behind you. No, I'm not going to critique what Ray said at all, because that's Ray's opinion. As wrong as it may be, it's his opinion. And I believe everybody should have one. But no, I'd like to do some personal type thing. I worked for a company that was owned by H.L. Hunt's granddaughter. What? Yes, H.L. Hunt's granddaughter. In fact, it was the Hill family. And anyway, it was Express One Airlines. I worked for them as a maintenance controller. And I remember 1991, when we had the first Iraq War, that they had the flag up behind the reception desk. How patriotic, I thought. How patriotic. But they sent our aircraft to Costa Rica to be worked on for their heavy checks and overhauls. So my question was, does patriotism only go as far as into your wallet? And that's it. And that's what we have when we see these people with inversion taking jobs and sending them overseas, getting tax breaks to do it. We got a problem. We got a real problem. And it's called money in politics. Yes, I do give money. I don't give as much as the Koch brothers, to get my way, but I do contribute to the candidates of my choice. And if you look at some of our candidates on the Democratic side, and I think Calvin's a fine example, I am not an educator, so I'm not going to give you one side and the other and say, you weigh it. I'm going to give you my opinion. And my opinion is this election coming up is one of the most important elections I've ever seen in my life. So I take it that people should start looking ahead. Don't take the one issue. Nobody per se is pro-abortion, even though they like to paint people that way. I am pro-choice. And I'm pro-choice because I think it's up between the woman and her doctor what happens, and not the government and not the politicians we have in there. And one more thing I'll close with. Not yet. I haven't closed yet. One more thing is basically Walmart. Walmart, I had a friend, he's 47 years old, that worked for Walmart. He started at $7.50 an hour. He got up to, I think, $8.25 an hour. He was on food stamps. He had to get subsidies. And we are paying for Walmart's lack of paying their people a decent price. And I also spent a little time in jail over that. Thank you.
My name's Helen Bush. This is only my second time here, and I promised myself to be quiet for several weeks, but somebody already inspired me. If I just... No, I'm not. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat from many generations back. And I got this name, and I realized before I came to Dallas that it was connected to the Bush family. That's kind of a funny story. And I've been at SMU all these years, since 1973. So that kind of takes my breath away for your crowd, because little kids are always asking me, are you a kid of the president? And I go like, no, I don't go to 4th of July parties at all. But I want to tell you my journey, how I happened to come to your meeting. I don't like Starbucks coffee. I saw a video of how Starbucks coffee is much more expensive than the price you pay of $1.75 or $1.60. It's related to environment. It's related to protecting the environment. It's related to sustainability. It's related to respect for agriculture. It's related to respect for native peoples. It's related to globalization, because if you want to talk about a global company, Starbucks should be like one and number one. So I saw your advertisement on the bulletin board, because I always read bulletin boards, because I float around to different schools and people go like, how did you know what you know? And I go like, I read bulletin boards all the time, and people think a friend told me, and I'm going like, I read it on a bulletin board. So I'm confessing to you, I read your advertisement on the bulletin board, and I saw your speaker was Catherine McGovern last week. I met Catherine McGovern and several political candidates in the state of Texas, because I'm interested in protecting the environment, and I'm so glad to see people, probably maybe my generation, in here, because you have to remember the Environmental Protection Act of the 1970s was a great accomplishment, and many people worked quite a few years on it, and it was a good law, and now it's 40 years later, and we're seeing it run over by corporations. And I've been raising kids for 40 years instead of 20 years, and so in 2009, I went straight to the Sierra Club, which I met Catherine McGovern through the Sierra Club, and I just went to their environmental, political concerns branch, a group of people like this that are interested in environmental subjects, ecosystems, protecting prairies in Texas, protecting waterways, holding cities accountable to limitations on progress and development, which should have been looked at and continued 40 years ago. And I just went to a meeting, and I was just sitting there, went to the next meeting, and I was going like, what's going on here? I'm just listening. I'm learning, because I've been working 40 years and minimum wage and budgeting and doing the best I can. And I was kind of shocked to learn what I did. I was kind of shocked to learn what I learned about politics. Our politicians are being bought by the richest people. The Koch brothers are absolutely famous for their disinterest in environment protection. And this is a kind of a hold that line subject. And it's also sensitive, because when it comes to creating jobs, they're technical, they demand environmental resources, and they create jobs, and then people go, we'd rather have jobs than protect the environment. So we go, don't protect the environment. But Sierra Club, I will tell you, this group of people is very sensible, very logical, very limited, very presentable, really, in their arguments, and they only win a certain amount of their confrontations, and their confrontations are with corporations funded by very rich people. And they end up in Congress, in the Senate, the National Senate, our local politicians, there's so many of them in different levels. County, city, state, local, your city councils, they have so much power that we invest in them by voting for them. On the local level, surprises me how much power our local politicians really do have over our lives. And I'm just learning, and I want to compliment Mr. Bluiett on such a logical presentation and speech on such a complicated, difficult subject. The only way I can present my point of view is to tell my journey. And I'm not very clear to express my point of views with arguments and authority. And I have to admit, it is an emotional factor of my persuasion that I was a biology major in college. I went to college 4 years and didn't graduate. And then I had to keep continuing. I went to Richland College. I graduated after 10 years. I went to SMU. They didn't graduate me. I said, this is a joke. You guys left me with 3 hours to graduate. I don't have a degree, so I can't get a better job. And I said, but here's the funny thing is, you didn't graduate me, so I couldn't go back home to Florida and get a job. I had to just stay here with the people I knew. And it took me 20 years to graduate from SMU. And I didn't quit. And I said, you didn't get rid of me. You should have given me the degree, and then I'd gone. So that kept me with the SMU community. Well, I need to be quiet, but I want to inject into the argument, and maybe you can get a speaker in September, October. You have to include in your political discussions the limitations on the environment, on clean water, on protecting our agricultural lands, on protecting clean air from the polluters that create jobs, the corporations, if you understand what I mean. Thank you for having me speak. You inspired me. The rich people are buying our politicians, and it gets real obvious if you want them to vote for protecting the environment. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, good. I have one. Okay. Yeah, thank you. You tell your friends about that to them.
My one friend, he left already.
Tell everybody.
Hi, thank you for giving such a wonderful speech. You covered many different subjects, and you seem very well. One fool at a time, please. You seem very well informed about a number of different things. I think there are some answers here, okay? One of the answers is allowing people to get a good education. Making it easier, not harder. Removing some of the hurdles. We heard tonight that one of the biggest hurdles is financial, economic. In order to improve your own economic situation, you have to be well-rounded enough to be able to work on several different levels, to be able to relate to many different kinds of people, not just your own little group that you understand or whatever. And I think one of the answers to this is something that who I hope will be elected as our Lieutenant Governor, Letitia San Miguel Van de Putte, has put forward. I want everybody to think about this. She calls it the Texas Promise. And for high school graduates who, starting in 2016, if she is elected, she wants to propose a constitutional amendment, meaning a November election where there's no president on the ballot, right? So very few people will come out and vote. But she wants to propose a constitutional amendment to the Texas Constitution that would allow students who pass certain requirements, who make an application, who also commit to doing at least 8 hours of internship or volunteer work for each semester, to receive free tuition, so long as they are eligible for in-state tuition, to receive free tuition for 2 years to get an associate's degree or a certification in a particular field, right? They have to be working towards a particular certification or associate's degree. And she calls this, again, the Texas Promise. And the reason that we're talking about this is we have got to have a workforce that is qualified to attract good paying jobs to Texas. Not just minimum wage, low paying jobs, as many people have pointed out, subsidizing the poor Walmart workers or whomever is at a comparable minimum wage level job. We've got to have people who can stand up and be proud of who they are and what they have accomplished, and not want to be drawn into this subculture. I mean, I'm calling it a subculture. Maybe that sounds a little bit arrogant. I don't intend it that way. But I think that the climate that we are creating by our failure to act and failure to mentor these young people, the climate that we're creating is causing this, contributing to it. If you don't like my use of the word causing it, we're at least contributing to it. Everybody in here looks like almost everybody in here is over 40 years old. You've got some life experience. If you're not mentoring or helping a younger person to achieve something, a child, a niece, a nephew, if you're not helping someone, then you are, by your omission, harming them. Period. Sorry, to quote Robert Bluiett in the men's movement. You know, that's straight out of Robert Bluiett. You know what I'm talking about. So we can talk about all the issues, and we can circle all around it. But if you're not out there on your feet, walking the talk, then I personally don't have a lot of use for you. So, again, what I hope that each one of you will do is be inspired to look up Letitia San Miguel Van Depute, who is currently a state senator who served on the education committee for, I think, something like 12, 16 years, something like that. She's also a pharmacist, a business owner. I hope that you will look up a Texas Promise and that proposal that she is making to actually put some investment into our young people. Thank you very much for your time.
He did it earlier.
I've been late and I did it.
Any others? I think we're running out of time. Just so you know, we got to give our speaker time. First of all, I want to thank our speaker for being here. I think he did a great job. Speaking of jobs, a lot of jobs were created because of the Affordable Care Act, which was needed, especially if you look at the rest of the industrial world, which is healthcare, and we did not have. So that's a start. The next problem of creating jobs is to recognize we have 25 million people out of full-time work due to automation and corporations leaving the country to go where labor costs are cheaper. We need to put tariffs on corporations, not countries, to pay the difference in labor and environmental costs in order to sell their goods here. But in order to get Congress to act to do that, we need to get Congress to act to provide free airtime, maybe the last 90 days of a general election, which will have Congress represent the electorate instead of those entities that buy their vote in Washington, D.C. That's our problem. Then we could act to shorten the workday to 6 hours without cutting the daily pay and raising the cost of overtime to double time to outweigh the cost of fringe benefits. 25 million people could be re-employed full-time and we'd have taxpayers instead of tax trainers. And we would not have to worry about the dollar losing its place in the world currency. Lastly, if we want our retirement system to function positively in the long run, then we need a stronger base to strengthen our economy. That should be obvious. Thank you. Anyway, our speaker now gets to comment on a comment and close this meeting.
Well, I've said enough.
Well, you get whatever you want to say.
That's it, what I want to say. I thank everybody for the comments you made, the questions you asked, because I'm still struggling with this stuff, and I need feedback. Junior college students are not helpful in that area, so they're just receiving something from me and not really giving anything back. But I agree with my good friend here said, everybody has an opinion, and I don't want to take their opinion away. Even if he indicated also, I'm quoting you, if the opinion is not correct. So thank all of you for coming out here and putting up with me. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, for your information, this is it for tonight, but we're going to retire down to Starbucks down the corner. You're all welcome there, and our speaker's welcome there, so a little more camaraderie. They want us out of here by 9 o'clock.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call. So when visiting the Barbec's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.